All right, so today we're diving into some pretty fascinating stuff. We're taking a look at a blog post you sent us about your ancestor, Miranda Wade, later Miranda White. It's really cool how this blog post takes us through her life and times.
It really is. We're basically going to break down this research into the most interesting parts so you can have a better understanding of her life, kind of like a historical deep dive.
Exactly. And so just to make sure everyone's on the same page, the blog post you sent us is from Genea-Musings.com right now.
Yes, that's right. And it's actually part of a series called 52 Ancestors in 52 Weeks. The author, Randall J. Seaver, is tracing his family history. And, well, Miranda, who lived from 1804 to 1850, turns out to be his third great-grandmother.
And your ancestor, too. Talk about connections across time, huh?
It's amazing, isn't it? Genealogy really brings history to life in such a personal way.
It really does. So for this deep dive, our goal is to go beyond just the basic facts and figures. We want to uncover who Miranda was as a person, what her life was like, and what we can learn from the clues left behind in these historical records.
Right, it's like solving a puzzle, piecing together her story from these little snippets of information.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with the basics. Where was Miranda born, and who were her parents?
Okay, so the blog post cites a book called Genealogies and Family History of the State of Connecticut by Cutter. According to this book, Miranda Wade was born on June 25, 1804, in Foster, Rhode Island. Her father was Simon Wade, and he lived quite a long life, from 1767 to 1857.
Wow, almost 90 years old. That's pretty impressive for that time period.
It is, isn't it? And Miranda's mother was Phoebe Horton. She was born in 1772 and unfortunately passed away much earlier in 1820.
So Miranda would have been about 16 when her mother died. That must have been a difficult time for her.
Absolutely. Losing a parent at such a young age would have been incredibly challenging. So we have a pretty solid understanding of Miranda's early family life based on this source.
And then, like most young women of her time, she eventually got married.
Right. The blog post tells us she married Jonathan White, who was born around 1805. Unfortunately, he also died in 1850, the same year as Miranda.
What a coincidence. Or maybe not. We'll get to that later. So when did they get married?
Well, their first child, Henry Arnold White, was born around 1824, so the author estimates they probably got married around 1823, when Miranda was about 19 years old. The marriage likely took place in Foster, Rhode Island, where they were both living.
Okay, so they started their family pretty young. And how many children did they have in total?
They had 3 children that we know of. Henry Arnold, who we just mentioned, was the oldest. Then came Albert Henry White, born in 1827, and finally, Harriet A. White, born in 1836.
So they were raising a family for quite a few years. It's interesting to think about what their lives must have been like during that time.
It really is. But, as often happens with historical records, things aren't always as straightforward as they seem. The blog post points out a bit of a discrepancy regarding Miranda's birthplace. While Cutter's genealogy says she was born in Foster, both the 1850 U.S. Census and the mortality schedule from that year list her birthplace as Gloucester, Rhode Island.
Oh, that's interesting. So which one is correct?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This is actually a really common challenge in genealogy. Different records were created for different purposes and at different times, and they can sometimes have conflicting information. It's possible that the information for Cutter's genealogy came from a family member who had a particular recollection, while the census and mortality schedule might reflect how Miranda or her family identified her birthplace later in life.
So it could have been a simple misunderstanding or a change in how they identified their hometown.
Exactly. Or it's possible that someone just made a mistake when recording the information. The important thing is to look at all the available sources and try to piece together the most likely scenario.
Right. You have to consider the context of each record and weigh the evidence.
Exactly. And for you listening, if you come across similar inconsistencies in your own research, don't get discouraged. It's all part of the process of uncovering the truth.
Absolutely. It's like a detective story, right? Now let's move on to 1850, which seems to have been a very significant year for Miranda and her family.
Yes, unfortunately, 1850 was a year marked by tragedy. Jonathan White passed away on April 19th from something called lung fever, which was a common term for various respiratory illnesses at the time.
And lung fever was often a very serious illness, wasn't it?
Yes, it could be quite dangerous, especially before the advent of modern antibiotics. And sadly, just a few months later, on August 27th, Miranda also passed away. She was only 46 years old.
Wow, that's so young. What was the cause of her death?
The records say she died from pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the lining around the lungs. It can be caused by a variety of things, including infections. The mortality schedule indicates that she was ill for 7 weeks before she passed away.
So both Miranda and Jonathan died within a few months of each other. It makes you wonder if their deaths were somehow connected.
It's certainly possible. Perhaps Miranda was weakened by grief or caring for her sick husband, making her more susceptible to illness. Or maybe there was an infectious disease going around that affected both of them.
It's a tragic story. To lose both parents within such a short time must have been devastating for their children.
Absolutely. It would have been a very difficult time for them. But let's go back to Jonathan's death for a moment. The blog post mentions that his will was probated shortly after his death on April 27th.
And probate is basically the legal process of confirming the validity of a will, right?
Exactly. It ensures that the deceased person's wishes are carried out and their assets are distributed according to their will. In Jonathan's will, he named his wife, spelled Miranda in the document, and their 3 children.
So despite the misspelling of her name, it's clear that they were a close-knit family.
Yes, it seems so. And it's interesting to note that just a few months later, on September 14th, the 1850 census was taken, providing us with another snapshot of the family.
What does the census tell us?
It shows the surviving family living in Killingly, Windham, Connecticut. Albert, the middle child, was 23 years old and listed as a farmer. It also says that he owned $1,200 worth of real property.
So even though they had lost their father, it seems they weren't completely destitute. Albert owning property suggests some level of financial stability.
Exactly. And his sister, Harriet, was 14 years old at the time. The census also lists Miranda, age 46, as living with them.
So they were all together trying to rebuild their lives after such a loss. It makes you wonder what prompted the move from Rhode Island to Connecticut.
It does. Was it for work opportunities? To be closer to other family members? We can only speculate, but it's a question that might be worth exploring further.
Definitely. Now, the blog post also mentions that Miranda was buried in the White Chase lot in Gloucester, Rhode Island, after August 27, 1850. And her husband, Jonathan, is also buried there.
That's right. So even though they died in Connecticut, they were laid to rest back in Rhode Island. This suggests a strong connection to Gloucester, perhaps through family ties, or simply because they considered it their true home.
It adds another layer to the mystery of their birthplace, doesn't it? If they were so connected to Gloucester, why do some records list Foster as Miranda's birthplace?
It's a puzzle we may never fully solve, but it highlights the importance of considering all the evidence and keeping an open mind when doing genealogical research.
Absolutely. Now, there's one more interesting detail from the blog post that I wanted to touch on. It mentions that there is no probate record for Miranda in Killingly, Connecticut.
That's right. And the lack of a probate record could mean a few things. It's possible that she didn't own any significant property in her own name, so there was no need for a formal legal process to distribute her assets. Or maybe her son, Albert, who already owned property, handled her affairs informally within the family.
So it doesn't necessarily mean she had nothing of value, but rather that her estate didn't go through the official probate channels.
Exactly. It's another piece of the puzzle that we can only speculate about, but it raises interesting questions about her financial situation and how her affairs were managed after her death.
It really shows how much we can learn about people's lives from these seemingly mundane legal and administrative records.
It's true. They offer a window into the past that we might not otherwise have. And finally, I think it's important to note how the blog post beautifully illustrates how Miranda fits into the author's family tree. He traces the lineage down through her son, Henry Arnold White, to his daughter, Julia E. White, and so on, all the way to himself.
It really brings home how these historical figures are our direct ancestors, the people who came before us and made our lives possible.
It's a powerful reminder that genealogy isn't just about names and dates. It's about connecting with real people who lived and loved and experienced life just as we do.
So to sum it all up, we've learned that Miranda Wade, later Miranda White, was born around 1804, likely in Rhode Island, although the exact location remains a bit of a mystery. She married Jonathan White around 1823, and they had 3 children together.
And sadly, both Miranda and Jonathan passed away in 1850 within just a few months of each other, leaving their children to navigate life without their parents.
We've also seen how historical records, like census data, mortality schedules, and wills, can provide incredibly valuable insights into the lives of our ancestors. But we've also seen how these records can sometimes be incomplete or contradictory, requiring us to carefully consider all the evidence and use our best judgment to piece together the most likely story.
It's like a detective novel, really. You have to follow the clues and see where they lead you.
Exactly. And sometimes you're left with more questions than answers, but that's part of what makes genealogy so fascinating.
Absolutely. It's a journey of discovery, and there's always more to learn.
So for you, our listener, if you're intrigued by Miranda's story and want to learn more, there are several avenues you could explore. You could delve deeper into land records in both Foster and Gloucester to see if they shed any light on the question of her birthplace.
Or you could research the lives of her children after 1850. Did they stay in Connecticut? Did they move elsewhere? What were their lives like?
There are so many possibilities, and who knows what fascinating details you might uncover.
That's the beauty of genealogy. It's a never-ending adventure, and there's always something new to discover.
So keep digging, keep exploring, and keep those family stories